Yeah. They used to have songs about that. Happy days are here again. Pardon my terrible singing. That's the same meme, though, recurring. Yeah, sure, you can believe in green shoots.
Yeah.
They'll never mature into a plant, and you'll be, grazing off of them like a cow, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, it just seems that what you're saying is that this collapse is imminent.
It's underway. It's not imminent. It is actually happening now. The single largest lender for the largest commercial real estate market on the planet has just declared bankruptcy. As I understand it, tomorrow, Citibank may file bankruptcy. Wow. That's the largest single bank in the U.S. And oh, by the way, there's a whole lot of rumor to support the idea that Citibank was more or less taken over by the Fed when it really failed back in 1999 and 2000 when it underwent problems in the internet bubble collapse. And that it's been more or less a zombie bank since then. And what's going on is something even much worse than we might all imagine, and that is the Fed's trying to cut the deadwood to survive, knowing full well that they can't survive, but it'll be a situation that you have to look at it in a kind of a strange way. We are consumers of a product from the powers that be. That product has been a relatively stable currency system, and the product is known to us by a brand that we call dollar. And the brand is dying. It's been tainted, and confusion and empire collapse will result every bit as surely as when the Roman powers that be diluted the silver and gold currency of the time with the introduction of base metals through basically counterfeiting their own currency. The confidence collapse caused the empire to fade very rapidly, and it'll happen much more rapidly here simply because of the mass communications.
Right, and of course during the last bank failures, which just ironically happened coincidentally along with the Mayan calendar's fifth night, just prior to the sixth day, which we're leaving now for the sixth night. I don't know if you pay any attention to that stuff. But
yeah, actually, I find it very, very cool. I love it when all this astrology stuff intersects our stuff or comes close.
Yeah, and it does seem to all kind of line up. And
there's some kind of big astrology thing that these astro guys are telling me for November 8th and 9th. Our data seems to suggest the 5th is the more potent day, but yeah.
It does feel as if, for many people that I know, that the tension has been building, and yet nothing has happened. I mean, we can see there's a few things happening. There's, as you said, there have been some shifts, there's some war maneuvering, there's this and that. But, I mean, talking about world-changing, paradigm-shifting events, it's all pretty much being wallpapered over right now, don't you think?
I do indeed. That, of course, but of course, that's the issue of a controlled propaganda media, and it's the same kind of thing that the people in the Soviet Union lived in for 20, 30 years, where their media was 100% devoted to only one function, as is ours, and that's propping up the establishment at any and all costs, including lies and fraud.
Yep. Yeah. And in fact, it seems like. I hate to say this, but it seems like the White House, and this probably is blasphemy, is really just kind of a dog and pony show for cops and robbers, and it's just a money laundering operation, basically.
All the way through, I would agree with that as a factual statement, that there's really no reason to vote anymore. They'll quite handily choose who they want anyway, and voting simply encourages them. And by the way, the White House isn't in charge, and probably will never do the disclosure thing because they're so far down on the security clearance. There's let's talk about archetypes for a second. There was a prototypical conversation that occurred with Jimmy Carter when he became president. Bear in mind, Jimmy Carter was a nuclear sub commander, and he'd seen UFOs in the course of being a nuclear sub guy. And, he had a high security clearance and so on, and he goes in and he becomes president, and then he says, okay, let's release info. I want to know what's going on here. And the head of his CIA said to him flat out, Mr. President, you don't have a high enough security clearance for me to discuss this with you. And, of course, who was the head of his CIA security at the time but George Bush Sr., George Bush 41, and who flat out told him that the president doesn't have a high enough security clearance. So they're never going to do the disclosure from that particular viewpoint, I think. If it happens, it'll be as part of a generalized coup against the shadow government.
Yes. And of course, according to whistleblowers that are seen to be in the know, there are 47 levels above the president's.
I wouldn't doubt it a bit. And, you know, beyond just saying, okay, he's not the highest, any number picked out is simply monkey mind speculation. And who cares? 27, 12, 2, it just does not matter.
Right,
he has a boss to whom he must, kiss butt and respond.
Exactly. It's a lot of people are concerned about the New World Order and, the Cheney and the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilaterals and the Bilderbergs and so on and so forth. In fact, my dad, when I was a little kid, told me that money was worthless and that the Bilderbergs owned everything. And I remember he used to say that all the time when he'd get drunk.
And now you discover he's not wrong.
Yeah, he knew, and he lived through the Great Depression, which was another one of those manufactured events by the powers that be.
Oh, it's terrible. Prescott Bush supports and bankrolls Hitler, and then is made a senator. And it's like, oh no, this is the interconnection of all of this going back into these skull and bones guys. It's just absurd. And we put up with this?
Yeah.
But that's okay. Circumstances are revealing themselves almost daily that indicate that this charade won't go on much longer. That the dog and pony show of the whole situation is going to change abruptly because we won't be able to afford the veneer overcoating. We'll have to just look at it all realistically.
That's going to be quite a shock for most people who don't know.
Well, it's going to be essentially coincident with or the causal component, a generalized social breakdown. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, which seems to me like it has to happen before we can make any progress whatsoever. I mean, until the old corrupt systems are exposed and crashing and down around their feet,
right?
They're in control. They own the world. They've got their handle on the pulse, and until we can see see behind the Wizard of Oz's curtain, who's pulling those levers. We have some ideas about it, but until we actually get some solid information and everybody knows the same thing, it seems like it's going to be almost impossible to.
Right. Well, we may get to that. We may end up with a revolutionary expression here in the U.S. that leads to show trials similar to what the Soviets had in the early part of the Bolshevik Revolution and beyond. Now, they had radio broadcasts, but there's no reason that we wouldn't have television broadcasts of show trials as we put various individuals, or the Revolutionary Council put various individuals on trial for crimes against humanity. Basically, that's what occurs. And, it's going to be a rather ugly situation because under such circumstances, really there's only one penalty for this, and that is that if you're run through the show trial, you won't be re-educated. You'll just kind of disappear somewhere. The issue for us is going to be how strange our particular revolution is going to get or continue. If you follow Gerald, what's his name,
Celente?
Celente, yeah. If you follow his work, he's saying the second revolution, American Revolution, has already begun, and I agree with him that the revolutionary impulse is certainly manifesting. I would just say that it just sort of took a hiatus between the late 1700s and now, and that we still have business to finish, and we never really got the first one correct.
Right.
So we're going to have to revisit some of this stuff. Yeah. And the issue is, with so many people and so many diverse factions and, the disenfranchised, just how strange will it become? By that I also mean how violent. Because we're getting to a situation where, the disenfranchised meth addict and then urban environment has more in common with the disenfranchised middle class who've been kicked out of their houses and are now trying to find shelter under freeways than those middle class do with their supposed political leaders. Mm-hmm. So it's under such circumstances and with a gap between haves and have-nots never having reached these proportions, it looks like this is all quite inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things about this New World Order is that, somebody mentioned something to me that hadn't crossed my mind. So many people are afraid that it's going to happen. He said, it's already happened.
Yes, it's a long, slow process.
Yeah.
And everybody wakes up to it at a different time, and they're either anticipatory or they gain insight that it's already occurring, and it's a question of shoving this. There was a great science fiction writer by the name of Isaac Asimov. He wrote a series of books in the 50s called the Foundation Trilogy.
Oh, I loved them.
Right. Within the Foundation Trilogy was this particular character. I think his name was like Harry Sheldon or something, and he had invented this psychosocial historical analysis.
Yes.
Okay. In his world, in the world in which Isaac Asimov postulated this character, stuck way out in the far reaches of a great galactic empire, they charted everything in the course of centuries. And basically what they were doing at a fundamental level, our stuff has been compared to it rather favorably, and I kind of like that. But basically what they were doing was they were watching large social trends emerge, and they would plot this, of course, across thousands of planets and, of course, tons of billions of beings, and it would take, centuries to occur. What we're actually kind of doing is seeing at the moment that sort of a view of history emerge around us. If you take a little step back, you can see these larger trends develop that we're all part of, unfortunately, and that we all have to swim through. But they're emerging in a space that's staggeringly brief, and it's just rather a shock as to how it comes out. And now I take heed of all of the literature about the revolutionary period here in the U.S. and in the French Revolution especially, of the 1700s, late 1700s, because in both cases they say that, events were agonizingly slow to unfold until all of a sudden it was on and everybody was hip deep in blood. And it just emerged and erupted in a magnificent chaos in a very short period of time once it reached this critical point. And I think we're getting close to that kind of stuff. Our data would suggest that some kind of arc or major point of unsettlement awaits us in the early part of 2010 that will tip us into a much more active version of revolution.
Interesting. And also there's, in 2010, there's mention of possible tidal overflowing. We know that the ice is melting in both places, on the top and bottom of the ball.
Yeah.
And, in fact, I had the strange feeling that one of those ice packs was cut with a laser, because there was a picture of it a while back, and it was
it's how square it. Oh, rectangular, yes.
Yeah, and I thought, that's got to be a laser device from the sky. They have them. They have anything you can imagine.
Yeah, but I would presuppose that you needn't go that far to see this come out, because you're dealing with a crystalline structure anyway. And crystals have a tendency to fracture along the platonic solids, so rectilinear shapes are to be expected. And a level of precision, you don't find rectilinear shapes more precise than are made by nature in the form of crystals. So,
true. And they are perfect, supposedly.
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've collected crystals and little bits and pieces of rock, and you can see just how precise they are.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
Now, what about, how do you think...
But before we move on, let's also note that the Australian government recently has put out this series of documents and studies and so forth about how it's not safe for Australian citizens to live around the coast because of the potential for sudden or rapid ocean level rises. What they're defining that as is rather low, but their level of fear is quite solid and would suggest